It sounds like you've had, thousands of tenants over the course of your real estate. I mean, maybe even tens of thousands at this point over the course of your real estate portfolio. So I got to imagine that a really big component of your business is actually like the tenant screening and getting the right tenants in there in that piece of it, because obviously the tenants, they pay you rent and the rent pays the bills. So is there a process that you've sort of developed over the years on how you approach filling vacancies with the correct tenants?
Yes, this is I'm going to give you our number one. We have a few steps, but our number one is like what I had told you before. We were in the finance business, so we understand what it is to have a tenant that has to pay you on a monthly basis. So the way that we approach our tenants is that when we look at that tenant, we underwrite them like if we were giving them a loan for 12 months. Because in all actuality, you're allowing them to live in your apartment building or your single family rental, whichever one it is, for 12 months. And if they don't pay you, you still have to pay your debt. You still have expenses on the property no matter what. So we make sure for us not to have a lot of evictions or late pays. We underwrite our tenant as that 12-month loan, and we make sure that they have 3 times the income. And that's hard. It's hard in a lot of markets because due to the income that they're receiving, or if you have a vacancy, you're desperate to fill it, right? And you're like, oh my God, I'm going to make an exception. I'm just going to let them in. They only made 2 times the income for the rent, but it's okay. I need to fill my unit. Well, guess what? 2 months later, you're going to have a vacancy. You're going to have an eviction, and they're going to live in your unit for 3 months or as long as it takes to get an eviction or to get them to pay up. So I try to explain this to a lot of newbies. When you have a vacancy, don't go desperate, because when you go desperate, you're going to still have it vacant. But at the beginning, when you have it vacant, you don't have nobody destroying your unit or living there for free. So make sure you underwrite them. Number one is their 3-time income that it could afford the rent. Number one. Everything else, we do the criminal background check. We make sure that they've been in their business, in their employment for 2 years plus, or in the same industry for a long period of time. So we have different criterias, but I tell you, the number one that you need to worry about, to everyone listening, underwrite your tenant as if you were giving them a 12-month loan, and you will be in good shape.
Does this mean that are you turning away just an incredible amount of applicants compared to the standard multifamily owner?
Yes, I would say so. I would say that we probably are very strict with that, because we've had our rodeos already where we have been lenient on accepting that. And at the long run, you fail anyways. So what are you doing? So that's been our number one. Do we turn down a lot? Yes. And we rather have that unit vacant for an extra week or so and find that right tenant than having it filled a week earlier and having the wrong tenant in your unit.
This highlights one of the principles that I live by in my investing career, that you don't want real estate to be your financial savior. You don't want to rely on income from real estate to live your life and pay your day-to-day bills, especially in the beginning. Because when you're doing that and you have a vacancy, the emotions that you experience are horrible. It's a panic. I have to get it filled or I can't make my rent payment. When you're living that close to the bottom, you don't make good decisions when you're that afraid. The right way to look at it is a very long-term thing. Yes, I have vacancy now, but that's a better problem than a wrong tenant, than an eviction, than a trash unit. And you hold out, you get the right person, and you learn what you're looking for, and you do better on the next round. So I just want to sort of highlight that element of what you're talking about here. And that's one of the reasons that I tell people you should be investing from a position of financial strength. You should have reserves. You should have money set aside. That's when real estate works the best, because you avoid those emotions of panic. Rob, would you say in your career that, have you ever made a bad decision because you thought I have to get something filled, or have you avoided that?
Oh yeah, very early on in my Airbnb career. I mean, obviously vacancy is like a big thing, right? You want to book your Airbnb so you can make money. It's the point of all real estate, really. But a lot of the times what we were doing is, we were just lowering the rates because we're like, yeah, you know what? I'd rather make $50 than nothing at all, or I'd rather make $75 than nothing at all. In like clockwork, every time we did that, the type of guests that brought into the units just never really panned out in my favor at all, and it really is one of those things that I've just learned the hard way so many times, to the point where now it's kind of just like you know what? I don't want to make the $200. It really depends on the property. Some properties, that bare minimum I'll take might be $150 a night. On properties like our Scottsdale property, where the average is $2,000 a night, the minimum I'm probably going to take on that is like $1,200, because at the end of the day, you kind of have to evaluate what's worth it and like when that trouble pricing comes into play. So for us, this is obviously something that you figure out with every new property, especially in Airbnb, because you're always adjusting the pricing strategy. But you learn very quickly to just go for the premium and accept that you'll have vacancy every so often.
Yep, I think that's such an extreme important piece when you're going to start investing in multifamily, in rental property, in real estate in general. And David, you're so right with what you said. If everyone just follows that, you would be so successful at the end of your investment. You're going to be so happy, and you're not going to have those negative outcomes that people say, oh my God, I hate being a landlord. It was so much work, and, I failed and I didn't make the return that I thought, because they do all those mistakes. But if you do exactly what David said and follow those rules and stick to them, you have to stick to them. You would love being a real estate investor for a lifetime.
So when you're screening for tenants, what are some things that in your experience, Sophia, you've learned are really good to look for? Any tips that you can offer for how to do a good job with this element of the business?
Time in business, or time in their employment and the industry that they're in was something that we also noticed that was a very steady tenant. Was if that tenant has been in the same job or industry for a long period of time, we found that those were very steady tenants. Now you see a tenant that comes in and has been at his job for 1 year and it's an electrician, but the prior job, he was a plumber and, stayed in it for 6 months. And the other one, he was there for 2 months and he was a janitor. And so those type of things, you see that they're inconsistent, they're going to be an inconsistent tenant. So I really, really, nail down on income, on their steadiness of their employment, or they could be entrepreneurs and have their own business. But those two things, they just go hand in hand, and you're going to see the consistency of a good tenant when it comes down to checking those two items. Number one, though, like I said, stick with the 3-time income for rent. It's going to be the number one best thing that you ever do. If that's anything I ever have to tell somebody, is that's my number one. But the second one is the consistency of their employment.